Recently, I've been down the Dune rabbit hole, or wormhole, reading the books, watching the movies, reading the books about the movies. It's all stuck in my head like Paul's visions. And one thing that stuck out to me is the 3 S's that the setting and stories revolve around: spice, Shai-Hulud, and shields. The first 2 are linked and important because spice enables space travel in their setting. The third is what I'm going to talk about more today though, because not only are they really cool looking outside of the 80s movie, they inspired lots of other stuff, but most importantly they're right at the heart of what makes Dune, Dune. The shields in Dune are so absolutely genius because of their effectiveness at enabling exactly the sort of setting Frank Herbert seemed to want. This is done through some very simple rules which have some very interesting consequences. The main rule is a simple one. The shields use the fictional Holtzman effect to repel fast-moving objects. So bullets, shrapnel, thrown objects, even a fast strike with a melee weapon, they all bounce off like my attempts at flirting. That's it, that's their whole job, and it's made projectile weapons almost useless, which is why everyone, and especially their mothers, fight in melee combat. But it's not ordinary combat, it's more like a peculiar dance where you have to make an opening to slowly get to your opponent. As the famous line goes, the slow blade penetrates the shield. Which is just such a genius line. Yes, it's a memorable phrase that summarizes the whole fighting style people have to adopt, but there's a deeper sentiment behind it too, about taking your time before acting with skill and precision. In the book, where we get the benefit of reading people's inner thoughts, we see how Paul applies that logic to the entirety of combat, using the first stages of duels to figure out how his opponent thinks and works. Except for the thoughts, all of that is excellently communicated to the viewer in one of the very few action scenes the original book has. That sparring session between Gurney Halleck and Paul Atreides, God, it's so good. It's the perfect blend of exposition, character building, setup and action. It's so simple, but so complex. This awesome scene is elevated even further in the Villeneuve version because of the excellent visuals of the shields. That temporal blurring of the previous and next frame together with the current one is so bloody cool. Way better than the hand-drawn version in the 80s movie. Like, I get there was a ton of hard work that went into this effect, but it just doesn't look good. You can't see what's going on and you can barely understand what's being said by the 2 jello monsters slapping their dicks against each other. Yeah, the newer movies do have the benefit of better technology, but it also seems built from the ground up to be easily understandable to the audience. There's the very obvious bit of visual feedback with the blue glow when it bounces in impact, which doesn't make all that much sense to have in universe, does it? However, the big red glow when the shield is being defeated is something that absolutely does make sense. A big warning to the wearer to deal with this problem before it becomes lethal, which is exactly what the Baron did by flying away from Duke Leto's poison breath, his life just barely saved by the gas being slowed as it was passing through his shield barrier. One thing the new movies didn't do though is to show the interaction that shields have with lasguns. Yep, a big ol' subatomic fusion detonation at both the shield and the lasgun. So, despite their incredible potency, lasguns are generally thought of as being too risky to actually make use of. At least everywhere except Arrakis, because of the worms. There's something about shields that drives sandworms crazy, and alongside the way sandstorms can short them out, shields are just completely unusable outside of a few safe areas in the north. That means the Fremen, the people living in the deep desert with those hungry worms, don't use shields, and neither can anyone else going out into the desert. That inability to use shields is the cause, with the effect being the devastating power of lasguns can be freely put to use. We see both the Fremen using this to sabotage Harkonnen spice mining operations, but also by the Harkonnen to defend those spice operations and to hunt down the Fremen. On top of that, the lack of shields means even old-fashioned artillery and projectile weapons can now be used. You'd think they'd end up being more widely spread than they are on Arrakis, but they're not even really in the playbook. Everyone thinks in terms of melee combat because of how deeply ingrained shield usage is. The technology basically won the arms race so thoroughly that it seems that people struggle to even conceive of other options. And that's another thing, the idea of an arms race just being won on! That's pretty interesting too. In reality, there's a constant state of offensive and defensive technologies one-upping each other. Methods of attack change and improve in order to defeat or ignore defenses, and protection evolves to counter those new threats. Sometimes this can lead to huge paradigm shifts in how wars are fought, but to me it seems like these are generally on the offensive side, like aircraft. It's rare to see a defensive technology be so overwhelmingly potent that all combat is forced to move around it, but that's exactly what Dune's shields are like. Yeah, it was constructed by Frank Herbert to be that way, but it's still intriguing because of just how comprehensively it works. In fact, the main plot of the first book and its adaptations is enabled by the shields. That is how fundamental they are. Because shields are most efficiently breached by melee combat, whoever has good numbers of the most skilled combatants is more likely to win any given battle. That's partly why the Atreides were so threatening to the Emperor, and why he wanted to get rid of them. Duke Leto was too popular among the great houses, and his troops were too well trained by the Atreides battlemasters Gurney Halleck and his dog. And Duncan, Idaho. This goes even further with the Fremen, whose harsh existence in the deserts of Arrakis has created a highly skilled fighting force. They're even able to take on the Emperor's elite Sardaukar, who had a similarly tough existence on the brutal and secretive prison planet of Salusa Secundus. In fact, in the book, the Baron makes a comment about turning Arrakis into a prison planet as well. He means for forced labour, but it's taken as meaning he could raise his own Harkonnen-loyal super troops. It's amazing what intrigue can get spun out of shields forcing melee combat, isn't it? All those different puzzle pieces fitting together so well is utterly genius, and it makes me wonder what direction did Frank Herbert come at it from? Were shields made in order to create a setting that enabled the story, or was the setting made and then the shields came later on to justify it? Like many things, I suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. While we're talking about the idea of inventing the shields, we've just got to talk about the big innovation that the Villeneuve movies came up with: slow bombs. These are used to destroy shielded frigates landed on the surface, and are like a giant explosive version of the slow blade. Rather than plummet to the surface where they'd just be deflected, they drift slowly and gently down to their targets. Right before contact, they slow down even more, passing through the shields before detonating inside in a really cool way. Seeing the high-velocity explosion be momentarily trapped within the still functional shield before it fails is just something else. Just yet another thing to chuck on the pile of awesome visuals from these movies. But like, this thing in particular is just a passing thing. A perfect little moment of anticipation and release. The artists behind it are absolute geniuses, and it's all built within that framework of how the shields work. While this technology is clearly very important to the setting, ultimately it is just one piece of the puzzle behind what makes Dune so special. Alongside the dukes and barons, fiefs and houses, the hand-to-hand fighting that shields enable adds to that sense of experiencing history 8,000 years in the future. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate, fighter and carrier design reference books, as well as 1 week early access to upcoming videos. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.